Do you want to be a champion? Listen up. If you want to be a champion, you need to compete as early and as often as possible. Let's get started. So, as many of you know, my name is Master Schiele, and I've dedicated my entire life to martial art training. You name it, I've most likely seen it. So with that experience, what I want to do is I want to put this video together to try to help you. Now, have you ever seen the movie Karate Kid? If you've not, let me give you a little background. In the movie Karate Kid, there's this kid, Danny. He's getting bullied and picked on. And what he decides to do is he decides to do karate training, does it for a couple months, and then decides to enter a black belt, high-ranking black belt division to try to beat his bullies publicly. Now, in the movie, he trains for a couple months, goes to his first tournament against martial artists that have been competing for years and years and years at a high-level competition, and he beats them all. Now, it makes for a great movie, but any martial artist out there, and I think you'll agree with me, know that would never happen. Here's why. You need experience to get good. If that's your first competition and you're competing against the best of the best, you're not going to win in that division. So what happens is you never go a couple months of training and then go into a black belt division. It just doesn't work that way. And if you watch the movie, you saw he actually grabbed someone else's black belt and enter that division. So here's what happens. When you want to compete in a tournament, you're going to have a little anxiety, you're going to get nervous, and you're going to question yourself on when you should really start. Let me give you an example. When I see my students start and they get into martial art training as a white belt, for example, they go, I want to get really good at martial arts, and then, and only then, I'm going to get into my first competition. Well, the truth is, time is your worst enemy. Remember, as you start, you're not supposed to stay a white belt too long. That's just the beginning stage, right? White belt is almost like a blank piece of paper. It's a blank piece of paper so you can start to write on it, right? The moment you start writing on it, it's not a blank piece of paper anymore. The moment you start learning, that white belt is not going to be white for very much longer, right? You need to move on. You need to move on to the yellows, to the greens, to the blues, etc. So if you're a white belt and you're going, you know what, I'm going to wait for my first competition before I get really good, well, there's going to be other students and other martial artists that are white belts and said, you know what, I'm going to dive in, and I know that I'm only going to get great through experience, right? Experience is what makes us great. Think about your workforce, right? You get good by actually doing it. That's the only way. Experience is key when it comes to martial art competition. So if you're a white belt and you're going to go in your first competition, here's what you're going to expect. I want you to go in there. I want you to have fun. I want you to celebrate. If you win, I want you to celebrate if you lose. I just want you to celebrate for getting out there, period. Now, let's say, you didn't do your job the right way and you were a little bit higher of a belt before you entered your first competition. That's okay, but just put the stake in the ground now. If you're a blue belt, understand that there's going to be students that have been competing from white, yellow stripe, yellow belt, green belt, blue stripe, blue belt, 7 belts. They've had that experience. So you're going to go in there. This is your first experience, so you have to understand that. You have to understand that expectations for you are going to be a little bit harder because you don't have that experience. So that's why I say as early and as often as possible, that is the key. Now, when you go in the beginning stages, and I'll say this publicly, I have never won first place as a colored belt. I won many, many, many huge championships as a black belt, but those colored belts are really my experience building stages. And only because I competed early and often, that's why I became great. Wasn't naturally great as a martial artist. I had to put the work in. As many of you, right? You have to put the work in to become great at it. So when you get in your first competition, here's what I want you to do. Whatever belt you are, celebrate the victory of actually getting out there and doing it. Understand that the higher belt you are, it's going to be tough. You got to get that experience. But you're never going to get the experience by sitting on the sidelines. You're never going to get the experience by not putting pressure on yourself. You need to put pressure on yourself. There is a significant difference when I have a black belt that has been competing their entire life and I have a black belt that has never done a competition before. Classes have nothing to do with it. Training at home has nothing to do with it. It's all about experience. When you act as a champion, you're going to become a champion, but you got to train as a champion. Remember, only under the most extreme pressure are diamonds formed. If you're not putting pressure on yourself, how good are you really becoming? I hope this video helped, and I'll see you on our next one. Take care.